All right, welcome everybody to the Champions Journey podcast. I'm your co-host Scott Jones, along with co-host Mark Astor. We're going to apologize for Randy Grimes, just like Mark last week. Randy's caught traveling. Mark, last week you were caught traveling.
I was, and then I got sick. So got a lot of
Oh,
traveling these days. But anyway,
that's
it's
right.
all
You
good.
you you and your significant other were both sick. How you guys? You both feeling better now?
We're good to go. She's still got a bit of a cough, but I feel good, and I'm here. I'm excited to be here with you, and we have a great guest today, so I'm excited about that too.
Oh yeah, we got the best guest today. It's cool when you can find somebody who's got a great story, who's just a joy to be around, and who's also a good friend. So it's
Good
always
friend.
special to have that. I just want to remind everybody, if you're watching the show, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel and like us and share this with your friends. And certainly during the live portion of this show, if you're watching live right now, put your comments in, ask questions. We're willing to answer them, and certainly our guest will be too. Speaking of our guest, this is no stranger. I did a show with him earlier today on another podcast, but we're glad to have him on this one. This is Joe Kelley. Joe, how are you, brother?
How you guys doing? Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with the two of you, who Mark I've known for a very long time, and Scott as well. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you guys go back a bit, and the whole gym rat thing. You guys are talking muscles and everything else. I'm going to join you in that conversation sometime in the next year.
All right, I'm going to hold you to it. Accountability is key, buddy.
What's that?
I said I'm going to hold you to it. Accountability is key.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Mark has already said that he'll coach me along, and if I have the two of you guys working on me, that'd be great. But let's talk about you, Joe, for a minute. Well, first of all, Mark, what is your experience with this gentleman, Joe? What is your opinion of this guy?
Well, I mean, he's salt of the earth. He's got one hell of a story and a great journey, and him and his wife Maritza. They're incredible people. I mean, I enjoy following them on Facebook. They post really inspirational stuff, and Joe's he's a good family man. He's trying to take care of his family. He's also trying to help a lot of people. And his story is not just incredible, but it's inspirational. And I consider him a good friend, and his wife is a good friend of ours too. So, I'm waiting for the movie to come out. That's what I'm waiting for, and I want to know who's going to play him. I mean, it's that kind of a story.
It's got to be one of the Wahlberg brothers playing him.
I would think.
I mean, he looks like one of the brothers himself, doesn't he? He's Shlomo Wahlberg, the one nobody talks about.
He's going to have to be the one who's in good shape, otherwise they won't look like him.
Fly under the radar with that one, right?
Karen Hurley's with us, and she's sending her shout outs. Love to all. Thanks for joining us, Karen. All right, so let's talk a little bit about you, Joe, and certainly about your journey. First of all, you're home. You make South Florida your home now, with your fantastic family and your terrific business and stuff. But you're originally from the great state of Massachusetts.
I am.
And I know nobody can hear it in your voice, but you still got a little bit of that accent.
It comes out when I'm passionate or when I go home to visit. But yeah, I'm from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, Falmouth to be exact.
Well, between your accent and if my Jersey comes out in Mark's accent, nobody's going to understand any of us.
It's all right. We're good.
Yeah, we're
We're
good.
gonna be fine.
So, you are somebody who has conquered, for lack of a better word, conquered your life in addiction. I just want to kind of set the stage. You didn't grow up in a family of addicts and alcoholics, and you didn't grow up like destitute and all that stuff. You came from a nice background, right, Mark? I'm sorry, Joe.
No, I did, but I'll correct you on one thing. Both grandfathers were alcoholics. Both chiefs of fire departments. And growing up, my father, it skipped my father. My uncle was an alcoholic as well. And growing up, being kids and big fish in the little pond, going out into the woods, having a few beers. My dad would always tell me, be very careful of that stuff. I never understood it to that degree, and I'd like to say that alcohol was a part of my story. It really wasn't. I mean, I was never really a big drinker. Didn't really care about alcohol too much. Didn't like the way it made me feel. it was more, the pain pills when I got injured on the job, and all the stuff mental health wise that was going on with me that really afflicted me. But it doesn't discriminate. Alcohol, the alcoholics look at the drug addicts and talk down on them. The addicts look at the alcoholics and talk down on them. It all ends the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I used to look down and say, "Hey, listen, I'm an alcoholic. I'm not like those drug addict people.
Right.
They're a lot worse. They sleep under the lower part of the bridge. I'm always up top."
Yeah.
But anyway, I got to ask you. You went through high school. You weren't a troublemaker. You were dedicated to sports and to doing good things and stuff. So you went. Mark, this guy was like all sports, right? Football. I think we talked about everything but hockey.
Yeah.
You played everything. And you went from that into college. You went to police. You worked at police. So you've kind of set up this lifestyle of being like the good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you go from that to sitting in prison because of addiction? How does that happen?
Well, I've pieced it together over the years. Obviously back then, when I landed in a jail cell, going, how the hell did I get here? I grew up. Athletics kept me out of trouble. Athletics, me looking back, saved my life, gave me something to dedicate towards, and I was very blessed with God-given talents. To be athletically gifted that paid for college with baseball and football. I got out of college. My dream job, I had two grandfathers that were first responders, and even growing up, I always loved the authority figure. I love the fact, with the police cruisers, being a young kid, I think we all do, the lights and all that, and, saving people. And I ended up getting my dream job. Back then, I didn't have any connections. I didn't know that, the president or this and that. And most people that get in those jobs know of somebody that get in. And I got in, and I was very blessed to get in. And it was the best thing that probably ever happened to me. I remember going to my mailbox like 10 times a day, looking to see if I got that mail that says you're in. And when I finally got in, it was like, life had come full circle. And my life up until that point, was always blessed. I was always in the paper for great athletic things, whether it was high school or college. And then, making the police department, and, I went up the ranks pretty high, in terms of what I did and how I did it. So I was very blessed up to that point.
Joe, which police department did you work for?
I worked for Mashpee Police Department. It's the town over from where I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which town was that you grew up in?
So I grew up in Falmouth. I worked in Mashpee, and I'm actually implemented the first. Well, it wasn't the first, but they hadn't had a canine unit there in like over years, and that was my dream job. I was always very ambitious. I implemented the canine unit that they have there that is still going on. But then I made the emergency response team that covered all southeastern Massachusetts. And a lot of the things that I grew up with, a lot of the things that I grew up with wanting to be in that position, it was very true. But I didn't know the other side of things either. Do you know what I mean? And when I say the other side of things, I mean, for somebody like me, I saw things in a high-ranking position, whether it was emergency response team, whether it was fatality accidents, whether it was calls that I was going on. And I saw things on a daily basis most people don't see in their lifetime. And that was the part that I couldn't, at the end of the day, I was a first responder, alpha male, so-called, but I'm still a human being. And those things are what really started to affect me. Before any substance use came in, it was a lot of mental health type of stuff.
Now, you described an injury. An injury caused you to be on painkillers, and that's what kickstarted your addiction. Yeah. So this isn't somebody who was out running and gunning as a kid and getting in trouble and doing all that, other than the normal, kid stuff. Right. This is an adult who've paved a beautiful pathway for their lives, has achieved what they wanted to achieve and done what they wanted to do, and then he fell into addiction through an injury. Mark, how old is this story getting? We're seeing this all the time, aren't we, Mark?
Listen, look at Randy's story. where he got addicted to painkillers just to get him through the game. And then by the time he was done in the NFL, I mean, they were part and parcel of his life. So it's something we see a lot. But go ahead. Sorry, Scott.
No. It's fine. Keep going.
Well, I was going to say, Joe, maybe talk a little bit about your home life, because obviously things up there. I mean, I know you got married, and I don't know if you can talk about that, but obviously it's part of your journey and the whole addiction thing.
Yeah.
And I know that you've shared it, publicly before. So tell us a little bit, while this is all going on, this craziness, what's going on on the home front?
Yeah, the home front. I married my college sweetheart. Everything was great. She was going through nursing school. Go figure. Nurses and cops. I helped her through school. She got her nurse practitioner, and I had very odd shifts. I'm trying to make a name for myself in the department. So for both of us, we were both working. We were both very young. I was living in my uniform, to make a name for myself, but also to provide for my family. And also we know that when you do that, and you're not spending enough time at home, the relationships start to drift a little bit. It's not the same. And I also, to her credit, I was a washed up athlete. You got to think I was like the man, the myth, the legend from the town. And now I didn't have any sports to play. I wasn't on that pedestal no more. So what's the next best thing that most of us washed up athletes do? Oh, we joined the intramural softball league. All of a sudden that's the MLB. You know what I mean? So when I'm not in uniform, I'm all over the field, because I'm feeding off that electricity and that attention, because I still had great athletic ability, and I loved to do that stuff. But as things go on with the shift work, and the hours and the non-sleep, all that stuff starts to affect your mental health. Not to mention all the other stuff that I had to see or deal with, and negative energy on a daily basis. When you said, yeah, opiates, changed my life entirely, but it wasn't just the substances. You know what I mean? It was the mental health stuff beforehand. The stuff that I wasn't getting called out on, the stuff that I was stuffing on the inside. The substances were just something that I numbed the pain with, that overall ended me in prison. But it was the mental health stuff that, friends didn't bring up, because, hey, he's got it. He's strong. He's this, he's that. The stuff that I saw at work back then in 2008, 2009, it's a little better today, but I didn't, like I told you before, we were taught to give the help, not ask for the help. For me to come forth and say, hey, it's hard to deal with this situation. It's affecting me in terms of I can't sleep. It's hurting me in terms of when I go somewhere. I used to go to all the Christmas parties, all this. Now I'm getting more isolated and more isolated and more isolated, because I can't deal with what's going on the inside with me. I'm dreaming and having nightmares about certain stuff that I see, and I'm keeping all this in. When I got injured on the job and they prescribed me Oxycontin, which they give to cancer patients I had no business being on because of problems that I had during knee surgery, I took that stuff at first just to go back to work faster, because I was never one to sit on a couch and be laid up. Of course, would I have a beer or two while I had it? Yeah, I did, but I didn't know any better. It wasn't to do anything. What happened was, subconsciously, when I was put on pain medication, all of a sudden, all that stuff that I was feeling on the inside was numb. And I was like, wow, this feels good.
Okay. So how long did the use of the pain meds sort of go on before things started to go downhill for you both, professionally and personally?
I hit it for a while. It worked for a while, because insurances would give me, because of my status in the community and who I was, I'd get more and more all the time, never questioned it, until the insurance companies red flagged it. When the insurance companies red flagged it and I had to come out of pocket for it through people I went to high school with or something else, that's when things really started to go downhill.
What's the time frame here that we're talking about?
I would say, for me, I think everyone's situation is different. Maybe a year, because it started out, very, very, very quickly. But when it got to that point, the progression just went steamroll downhill.
Now, you're a police officer while this is going on, correct?
I am.
Okay. I'm just curious. You mentioned something very important about mental health.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that we point to that because that's very, very important. How much talk was going on as far as education for you as a police officer into healthy mental health or health or wellness? And how much information was given to you about addiction and things like that? Back, how long ago was this?
2008, 2009.
Okay. So, 2008,
Let me
2009,
answer that question for you real quick. Zero. Absolutely
zero.
None. And even when I was prescribed medication from the doctor for my injury, I don't know if they didn't say anything to me because they thought maybe I should know better. But nobody ever said to me, and they gave me that first bottle of OxyContin and Percocet and Vicodin and all the other stuff that came with it. No one ever told me that, hey, be careful with this stuff. You mean that, hey, even that small bottle, the first bottle that I took, how addictive it could have been. You mean, especially for somebody in my situation that was seeing the stuff that he saw on a daily basis, and not that doctors knew because I didn't talk about it. But like today, that's why I'm so vocal about what we do and how we do it, especially with first responders. I mean, I see it all the time now. I have countless people that I coach on my own personal business that are all first responders that are active and going through the same stuff.
And I know they're making a difference in some areas. We work with some great first responders. And Mark, I know you've dealt with first responders as well, but Karen and I with One Brother, One Sister, and working with you, Joe, with some other first responder groups. You've come in and spoke to some police. They are trying to change the awareness, but you're saying there was zero awareness of any of this stuff, and doctors are handing this stuff out like they're dispensing Pez. It's like they're not explaining it. Has that changed as far as you know? I know there's a higher awareness in the departments,
Right.
but even with prescription and doctors, both of you might have some information on this. Has there been more of an awareness as to educate people before just giving them pills?
I think it's, at least I'll speak before Mark does. I think it's changed in terms of the insurance. I think it's changed in a little bit with the doctors, but I still think it's being heavily overprescribed. I believe that, at least from a lot of the cases that I've seen, what I did back then, I know can still be done today, but it's cracking down more and more. I think that the emphasis on I know with pain pills, even if I go somewhere, and I'm always honest and upfront because I know what that stuff did to my life, they're not handing it out like they're Tic Tacs anymore. I think there's a long way to go as well. But Mark, you could fill in the gaps with your experience.
Not only the doctors are more aware. I mean, there was a very large case that went down here in Palm Beach County with the George brothers, the twins who were basically they had people driving from the Carolinas and New York coming down, and you go in there and you'd say, the patient would say, I have really bad back pain. And they'd walk around to the side of the building. There'd be an 18-wheeler there with a doctor and an x-ray machine. And They go in there, they get an x-ray, and the doctor say, you have scoliosis, your spine's curved. Well, everybody has some scoliosis. And here's a prescription. And people were going to the local hotel, and they were dead before you knew it. And So these guys got pinched. They, maybe it was the fact they were driving around in a monster truck in a Lamborghini that caught the FBI's attention. But, when you start having lots of dead people, all of a sudden in one area, law enforcement's going to start taking a look at that. So I think it was a combination of, one, people became aware of what was going on, but two, law enforcement started to really crack down. And these guys, I think, got, 18, 20 years, and deservedly so, because they killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I think we've certainly become more aware of what these things can do.
And I'll tell you, just elaborate a little bit, Scott. Most people don't know, which I don't know because maybe I don't say it enough, is my addiction started, being who I was, and I'm very boisterous about this because I think it's important, because I'm no different than anybody else. My addiction started with pain pills. It ended with shooting dope in the end.
Yeah.
And I say that, and I say it with some tenacity, because most people look at my situation and when you go from taking pills orally, sniffing them, whatever it may be, and then I come out and openly say I shot dope in the end, it's like an eye opener for a lot of people because of who I was. because it doesn't discriminate. Like I told you a long time, use today, doesn't matter if you're from Yale or jail.
That's right.
Affects everybody. You know,
and I got to ask you, did you see the transition, or were you unaware of it, where you were taking pills to do prescription, then they were starting to cut you off, you had to start getting pills other places, and now next thing you know, you're shooting dope.
Right.
Did you see that transition, or was it just like a blur? Were you
me,
aware of what was happening?
For me, I think I'd be lying if I say that I didn't see the transition. But I can say this is when I started taking this stuff, and it was numbing everything else. It was like the perfect antidote for everything I was going on, right? It improved my marriage at first, it improved my father's skills. I even thought I was better at work. You know what I mean? And then when I was coming off of this stuff, you know what I mean? I crashed. Like I was worse off both internally and physically than I was ever before in my life before taking anything. Do you know what I mean? So when I started to take more and more, and this is just the progression. I think anyone that knows anything about, addiction knows how the progression goes, was me using just to get back to normal. I was not reaching highs and highs anymore. I was using to get back to baseline so I could function as a human being.
Totally understand that. And again, this is a story that we see all the time. And now that we're all working in similar areas, working in different ways, but in similar areas to help people, we're seeing more and more of that story. And, one of the reasons I pointed out at the beginning of your life is I want to know, nobody's safe from this. It's possible for anybody to fall into these patterns, especially with the drugs today and everything. I got to ask you, so the end of your career as a policeman came when? Was that anything to do with your addiction or no?
Absolutely. All to do with my addiction. So what happened, and you can read some of it in the book and I'll share some of it too. But what happened is like I said to you, I couldn't get it through the insurance company anymore, or I had to wait 30 days, and my addiction wasn't waiting 30 days. It wasn't waiting 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So I had to go get it from outside of your normal means and find it from people on the street. And I chose, I'm going to get it from, because I lived in the town over. I went to high school with, I knew a lot of people. I knew that if I grabbed it off this person or this person, that my secret was safe. Unfortunately, somebody got apprehended, and they actually said, hey, I got some more info. And they turned, said, hey, I know one of the officers who's doing this or doing that. And it got brought to my attention. And here goes again, me thinking I had all my ducks in a row and thinking I had covered everything because I never interacted with this person. But they actually brought him in and polygraphed him, and he passed. And they wanted to question me, and I turned to anger, what we do, and we deflect and everything else. And I knew I was guilty as charged. But here's the thing. It wasn't so much being guilty or asking for help. The chief, who was actually a friend of mine and still is a friend of mine today, he said to me, he sat down, and this is what I do a lot of work with other departments on, is he sat down and he said, hey, Joe, if you need some help, we'll get you some help, right? But the only thing that I heard was, tell me everything you know so I can fire your ass. That's all I heard because of my mental state of mind. I didn't see the friend offering help. I was scared, frightened, more than I was afraid of losing everything I had worked for in my life. Little did I know I was going to lose it all anyway. I was scared. I was guilt-riven. I had lied so much to my wife at the time, to my friends. I had lied so much just to cover everything that I was doing just to feel normal.
Wow. So now you're no longer a police officer. You are somewhat probably dishonored or somewhat disgraced a little bit, maybe. Mm-hmm. You're into your full addiction. Where's your wife at this point? Is this the beginning of the end for you two as well?
Yeah, unfortunately at that time it was. And this is the part of the story where the wheels really fall off the bus. If it wasn't bad, then it got really bad. Because here was the deal: is I forcefully resigned. Everyone that I knew, you got to think of all my friends were law enforcement. I've never had, and I even hear it today, no one ever disliked me. Always one of the guys, very friendly, this and that, but nobody was talking to me either because they didn't want to be associated, whether they knew or didn't know, with what was going on with me, So, and then my wife took my kids, emptied their bank accounts, of course, because of what I was doing anyway. And I utterly, my family wasn't talking to me for the most part. Everything that I knew was gone. My job, my career, it felt my identity. It felt like it was my identity, and instead of picking myself up and saying, hey, you got to do something about this, I got angry. And I'm like, I'll show you. I didn't show anyone but myself, and I tried to get help a few times, but when I say I try to get help, those first 5 times in detox or anything else, it wasn't to get help. It was a pit stop so I could get ready to go out and do it again.
Mm-hmm.
You mean
just a quick get out of trouble real quick and then get right back to it kind of thing,
yeah,
right?
Because my mentality, Scott and Mark, was when that day had come and I had lost everything, I had made a decision in my mind that I didn't want to live anymore. There was a number of times that I would put my gun in my mouth. I just didn't have it in me to pull the trigger. I would regret waking up the next day. I would regret having to wake up to do it all over again, hoping that I wouldn't wake up the next day. And that's where my life was for probably a good 6 to 8 months.
I want to point to this, and I don't want to harp on this because I don't like talking too much about suicide and things like the even ideations. However, for people to understand what real despair is to know that you would sit there with a gun in your hand, because I've been where you were at that time, and wanting with every fiber of my being to be able to pull that trigger. And then on top of that, hating myself even more because I couldn't.
Right.
Is that a familiar feeling?
It hits right at home.
And that's the kind of despair that goes with addiction, that I that you want to end it, but then the fact that you couldn't end it creates more hatred and more pain and more suffering. It's not like, oh, thank God I didn't do it. It's like, you're such a coward. Why didn't you? And that hating to wake up the next morning. So I just want to explain that kind of despair. From the time that you took that first pill because of your injury to this point of the lowest moments in your life, just before you go to prison, I guess, how long of a period was that in your life that everything went to shit?
6 months.
You're kidding me.
It was quick. My whole story is a matter of 2 years. My entire using career is 2 years. And it's been like that. I broke it down my whole life. I've been either all in or no go, whether it's been for the positive or it was for the negative. And let me tell you, when I made that decision that, hey, I didn't have a will to live anymore, all bets were off. I didn't think I was going to live to face any of the consequences.
Wow. Mark, that's not, everybody's different. Some people it takes 20 years to get to that point. Other people, look at it, 6 months. But you've seen this before, Mark. Everybody's different, right? There's no rules to this.
Yeah, some people can be suffering for 5 or 10 years, and other people, it's a year and they're done. It can be really, really quick, and it really depends on how people respond to whatever they're taking. It depends on their environment. If there's somebody, for instance, if you've got somebody who's always been a drinker and they just start to excessively drink, it can take years before they're just basically, broken. Right. I think up until this point, Joe had left a very clean life. He's always taking care of himself, been an athlete. And so he started ingesting this type of, poison into your body. It doesn't take long. Plus, he wasn't sleeping. He was, basically not able to function. And it wasn't going to take long before everybody else around him realized, that this wasn't the same Joe that we knew.
Right.
And then there was, of course, which adds extra pressure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Joe, you're at this point now where everything's kind of gone. It's almost like you got nothing left to lose. You end up going to prison at that point. For a series of events. But is that when you went to prison, is that when you started to really think about, I got to do something different?
Yeah, it is. But I'd like to just rewind 5 minutes there. Probably
Please do. Please do.
one of the worst parts of everything, and I think which comes with who I was and my status in the community and everything else, was when I went down and I was arrested and charged with trafficking, for the weight that I had on me, that I was personally using.
Was that for the Oxys?
Yes.
So how did you end up getting caught?
Well, what happened is the girl that I was with decided that, hey, she was gonna give them or sell them to her friends. Here and there. And I was warned a bunch of times, but I wasn't listening to anyone, nor did I care about anything at the time. And we got a batch in the mail. We were FedExing out to California and sending back. And when it came in, they grabbed me. And they pinched me. But here's the thing: what I was saying was my most embarrassing moment through this whole thing, if not everything was embarrassing, was I was on the front page of every paper on the whole Eastern Board of Massachusetts and the whole state, because of who I was and my status in the community. It's not like anybody else that gets pinched on something else. They ran with that story. They ran with it and they ran with it. And I had reporters jumping out from behind trees trying to interview me. But you got to understand, being a big fish in a little pond, I was always on the paper for good things, not stuff like this. Like, I couldn't walk anywhere without somebody knowing who I was or anything else, So when I did get busted, I had to deal with that shame. And every time, and Mark, you know this as an attorney, I was only arrested once. But every time I went into court for that charge, there was like 10 other charges that I got hit with for non-violent drug criminal offenses, credit card theft, passing an illegal check, this, that. And every time I went into court, it was like 10 more charges. At the end of the day, I think I ended up with 50 charges or somewhere in that area. And we know how that can go. But the judge finally said, are we going to indict this guy or not? And they finally indicted me. Judge Nickerson down in Barnstable Superior Court. I went before him thinking I'm going in and coming out. He goes, I don't know how you've stayed on the street this long. He held me at $10,000 bail. And $10,000 to me back then, it was a life sentence because nobody was talking to me. I didn't have a pot to piss in. Nobody was coming to my aid. But the change within me, when I went into prison, even I'm like almost ecstatic. I'm like, oh, finally, I can't do it myself. Someone else will take me out.
How long were you sentenced to? What was the sentence?
I was sentenced. At first, I didn't know because I was in pretrial forever and until I pled out. So I was looking at a 5-year minimum, and I pled out because on a trafficking charge in the state of Massachusetts, it's a 5-year minimum. I pled out to a distribution charge. I pled out to 2.5 years in state prison. I ended up serving 19 months and I got paroled.
So what's that like as law enforcement going into a prison?
Oh, absolutely. This is what I was getting. My frame of mind, it's the number one question I always get. My frame of mind was, like I just said, is someone else can take me out now, right? Though I was fearful of it, I was like, I wanted it. This because I didn't want to live. I lost everything. Nobody was talking to me. I didn't like myself. I hated myself. When I walked in, it's crazy. My law enforcement training kicked in. I'm scanning the room. I'm looking at, I'm keeping my back to everything. I'm watching out this and that. They tried to PC me. I signed out. I didn't want to be PC'd. I didn't want to be with
PC?
other protective custody. They tried to put me in protective custody, but we all know who's in protective custody, and I didn't want to be around those individuals. So I'm like, I'll take my chances, and I go in, and there was people yelling from other blocks, 5-0, 5-0. And this is why I always say, I don't talk about it a lot. And for me, I choose to believe in God. But for me, my today, it's God, family, and help others. And I'm very big on God because it wasn't me that got me out of that situation. I'll tell you that. It wasn't a CO. It wasn't one of the other prisoners. Imagine being a high-ranking police officer going to state prison? Like, how I survived that, I have no idea. I can tell you what I did. I can tell you how I attempted to do that. But at the end of the day, you can attempt and do whatever you want. Only God got me out of that situation.
Wow.
Well, I think people would assume the inmates were your biggest problem, but I'm sure that the guards and the other people there probably didn't look at you very well either, because, now the prisoners are looking at you like a cop, and the guards are looking at you like a dirty cop. So you getting probably a bad thing from all around, aren't you?
You hit it right on the head. Yeah, I mean, it's going back to that initial thing that though I'm not different than anybody else, I am. It was the same thing, when I was all by myself. Everyone knew who I was. Nobody was talking to me because of who I used to be. Nobody was talking to me because they didn't want to be around me. Now I go into prison. Now I got no allies. I'm not liked by the prisoners. I'm not really liked by the guards, except for the guards who actually had issues and would talk to me about them.
Wow. We don't have a lot of time left. I want to get to the point, the transition point here, because now you're sitting in prison, and you obviously didn't serve the full term. Nobody does. But what happened in your transition? At what point did you start making the decision, I've got to do something different? And and I know it didn't happen the first time or the second time, but at what point made you start trying? And then at what point did you start to find success?
Yeah, for me, it was more diving into stuff that I never done before. In prison, I was forced to do a lot of things that I never did before. Read a book. I went through all of college. I don't think I've ever read a book page to page. Sorry, my college professors, right? But the thing is I was in there and I started reading about stuff, and I got hooked on personal development stories. I got hooked on, cases of people overcoming the odds, and my sports background and everything else. I was always taught a lot of those things. I had a lot of stuff built in me from law enforcement in my athletic career, that it's the fourth quarter. So I started reading this stuff, and somewhere the spark of life came back in, where I didn't want to die anymore. I wanted to live. That was the biggest changing point. Me getting right with God, asking him to help me out through this, get me through this, getting on my knees and saying, hey, let me find some way to get through all this. And through it, that fire that was once out got lit again. And then my mindset started to change from a negative mindset and blaming to take accountability, responsibility. And I decided to look at things, and I chose to look at it like this, was maybe instead of why me, why not me? Maybe I'm going through this so someone else doesn't have to go through this. Maybe I'm going through this so my kids never have to go through this. I started to look at things like I always looked at things. The old Joe that got all the scholarships, got everything he wanted, most of life, started to come back, where I said, if anybody can do this, I can do this. And it was all mindset. It was the initial. Obviously, you can have a great mindset without action. You're going nowhere. But the question was, what changed? It was my mindset, the will to live, and how I looked at things, my perspective.
Wow. Did you ever get a chance to go back to Mashpee and talk to your people?
I did. So today, we don't have a lot of time, but you're talking to some guy that lost everything, a convicted felon. I have no reason sitting here, aside for the work that I put in. I should have been dead a long time ago, but I don't take that lightly. So for me, I love to speak around the country. Going back to Mashpee, after a couple of years of being in Florida and going back there, I reconnected with everyone. Today, I travel the country and I talk at different police academies and different police departments about what I went through to help other officers that are struggling, not just substance use disorder. And yes, my story has something to do with that, but I'm a very big guy about mental health and self-care. Because if you don't take care of yourself, it leads to, areas of concern in your mental health. And mental health, sometimes leads to self-medication, leads to substance use disorder, right? So let's start where we need to start, because that was my issue. It was never about the substances. It was about what was going on the inside. So now, yes, I go back. My best friend is actually the chief of police now. Every guy I went to the academy with are now chiefs and police everywhere. At one point in my life, these people wouldn't pick up my phone call. Now I'm probably the first call from them if it has to do with a family member or, an officer or something else. When I got out of prison, obviously there was some work to do for a couple of years. That was the hardest point in my life, is getting out of prison and can't go back to law enforcement. Can't do a hell of a lot with my degrees. I'm a convicted felon now, but I chose the path of helping other people that have been through what I've been through. I chose to be a leader, to go through those painful obstacles to show that it can be done, because I'm no different than anybody else. There's nothing special about me. Do you know what I mean? I just have a conviction that I want to do something, and it's embedded in me. That air of life was breathed back in me, and now all I want to do is, I'm that type of guy. I'm very corny with quotes. It's like, tell me I can't do something, I'm gonna do it 10 times and take pictures. Do you know what I mean? Tell me that there isn't a way. There is no failure. There's only feedback, and how you apply that feedback within your life. Things are going to happen. Life screws us all eventually. Life loves to throw curveballs. It's about learning how to hit the curveball.
I'm gonna take exception with one thing you said. There is something special about you, but there's something special about everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, certainly we're all special, which I guess doesn't make it special anymore. But to find that, and what you found, I don't know what you did on a football field. I don't know what you did on a baseball field. I don't know what kind of big time arrests you've ever made and what kind of accolades you've gotten. But I've watched you today, Joe. I've watched you with the book you've written, with the company you built with your wife, the Obtaining Mastery, and helping to educate people to learn to better themselves and to help others. I've watched you in front of people telling your story and sharing of yourself. And I can't imagine I can't imagine you scoring a touchdown being better than what I've seen you do. I can't imagine that hitting a home run or a grand slam. A grand slam in the World Series is nothing compared to standing in front of people, sharing yourself, and helping people get better. And that's what you do every day. And that's what makes you special. And I'm proud to call you a friend and to see this journey and the things that you've done. Mark, this guy. Did you get the same impression?
I do, and we were at a conference last year in Cape Cod, and I saw him stand up in front of a couple hundred people and tell a story. It's very inspirational. He's a miracle. He's a walking miracle, And it's hard to imagine the old Joe, because I only know Joe as I know him now. And I mean, if you meet Joe, you meet his family, you're like, okay, that just doesn't seem possible that was the guy back then, because he's such an incredible individual now.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've got to ask you this: is full of despair and self-loathing as you were you wanted to die, where you felt like you've screwed everything beyond repair. Mm-hmm. When you look back on your past now, how do you view it? Do you view it with the same kind of pain that you lived in it, or is it different now?
It's different now. I mean, to me now, it's a blessing, because the man I am today, prior to even addiction, I like the man I am today. You know what I mean? The stuff that I went through, I always say to people all the time, I go, I wouldn't erase anything that's ever happened to me, because if I erase that, I erase me. Do you know what I mean? The stuff that I've been through in my life, as unfortunate as it is, I've tried to use it, try to turn a negative into a positive and be an impact in someone else's life, to be an impact in my own family's life, and share that information. But yeah, like, if that Judge Nickerson from Barnstable, Superior Court never had put me away, prison gave me the time I was unwilling to give myself, because I was one of those cases I wasn't going to stop because of my mental frame of mind. I'm sorry. I have a little guest. Sorry.
Hello, guest.
She snuck in. I'm sorry, guys.
So, don't apologize. You're showing us why you're working for what you work for.
Yeah, this is what it's all about. You know what I mean? And for me, like Mark knows me pretty well, family's everything for me. I love helping people, but I also talk to a lot of people about self-care and about taking care of yourself, because as much work that all three of us do and many others that we talk to, as much as we try to give, it's important to take care of ourselves and take care of, your family, right, Winter?
Yes.
It's important to take care of your family, because if you're no good to anybody else, if you're no good to yourself, it's very important.
It's the truth.
Absolutely.
We deal with stress. You got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And moving forward, everyone out there, no matter what you faced in your life, what kind of tragedies and what kind of garbage that you feel like you've been through, or those things that haunt you, you could turn those messes into your message. You could turn that nasty hard past into a great foundation to build beautiful buildings on, as Joe has done. And he continues to prove to people how change can happen. We need more awareness. We need more awareness in our first responders about mental health and about addiction. We need more awareness in our schools about mental health and addiction. We need more awareness, Mark, you'll agree, in our court systems about mental health and addiction.
Sure, definitely the legal profession.
And it's we all take up that mantle to try to spread the message as much as we can. Are you raising your hand because you want to say something, darling?
You want to say hi?
Hi.
Hello. And to go through the journey that we just went through with Joe, him telling his story, and to see him finish it with this beautiful young lady on his lap, this is amazing.
I'd like to give out, the freebie, Scott.
Please go for it. Go for it.
Freebie is, if you want the first chapter of my book, it went #1 bestseller on Amazon in the self-help category for like 4 straight weeks. Very proud of it. The book's not just about addiction. It's for the bankrupt professional, the reluctant divorcee, anyone that's gone through anything publicly, or challenging in their life. It's like GPS system. So if you go to badgebarsbeyond.com, if you put in your email, you'll get the first chapter for free. So if anybody's interested in taking a look at it, I wrote it, to help out anybody out there that needs some help, and if anyone out there, I always put this out there, is if anyone ever needs a help or talk, or, just needs somebody to talk to, you can go to joe@obtainingmastery.com. And I'm always open for a good conversation, or if I have a resource, I get resources like you two. We know a lot of people. We help a lot of people. And, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that we're all okay.
Absolutely. So go to badgebarsandbeyond.com or badgebarsbeyond.com, and you can check out the book. It's also available on Amazon. Or you can go to obtainingmastery.com and learn all about all the beautiful things that Joe and his wife Maritza do together. As a matter of fact, we'd love to do one of these shows with your wife here as well.
Yeah.
So we can hear so we just don't get your version. We'll get the truth as well.
Yeah.
You guys all know what I'm talking about. We all do it. All right. Mark, any final thoughts?
No, just big thanks to Joe for coming on and sharing his story. It's it never gets. I mean, I've heard the story before, but it never gets old. It's inspirational every time I hear it. So, and I'm going to keep following you on Facebook. He knows what I'm talking about.
Hey, we got to get together soon, by the way. So,
tell me when.
I will. I'll give you a call.
All right. Well, I'm Scott Jones, for Mark Astor and our guest Joe Kelley. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon for the Champion's Journey podcast. Make sure that you friend us, and make sure that you like this podcast, and certainly subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you'll see the next time our shows are coming up. You'll be able to join us. Everyone take care. Be good to each other. Remember, each day doing 2 nice things for yourself, 1 nice thing for somebody else, and you'll always have a good day. Everyone take care now.